All right. I've started recording. Um, Quick, Pike, do the intro. We prepared it ahead of time.
No one did it. He's lying. He's gaslighting all of you. He does this to me all the time.
Okay,
God.
that's fair. All right. Well, that's our intro now. So you did it perfectly, Pike. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We've only done reviews of DS9 episodes. However, now we have the tier list for season one, and it's a very different setup. So this is really just off the cuff. I have like 15 windows pulled open. I have the tier list itself. I have OBS, which is a new format I'm using for it. So everything's just fun and exciting. So Pike, explain to me what the goal is. Explain to the people at home too. What's the goal of doing this tier
Yeah.
list here?
So, as you said, we've only rated episodes before. Now we're gonna just I guess bore you with our like full like tier ranking for like each episode that we've covered. Even though I think every episode we already gave like a letter grade to. Like, yeah, those. Um,
More or less
but
we did, and like there's obviously I think there might be changes based on how we sort of feel post the whole season, right? Like a lot of those episodes we were sort of judging on their own, and kind of maybe looking back, we maybe are like, oh, perhaps I judged you too harshly. Once
yeah,
once you let's see, hold on, which is the order of it? Um,
this is just for
once
the visual learners and the crowd, the visual learners.
well,
They
it's also
they
just
need some help
it's
sometimes.
fun, it's easy, it helps us milk the same content we've already produced. So you know, uh,
Mhm.
our goal here is what we're going to kind of do is we're going to go through the episodes, have a as brief a summary as we need. We're not going to go too deep into it unless we're having a disagreement here because Pike and I might not align on every episode.
Yeah,
And
sometimes Hollow is wrong, and I will tell him so.
that is a lie. I am never wrong. I am only correct in waiting. Uh, so what we'll do is we'll rate the episode. Then, ideally that's going to match up with the rating we gave at the time. And then we're going to check what sort of the IMDb rating is of for this episode. And obviously, I think we're grading on a generally harsher curve, just because it's like we treat 5 as average, whereas like IMDb is like 7 is average. But
Uh,
generally, we'll have some idea of like, okay, so this is how we align with what other people say. I remember we looked over some of these when we were talking about Forsaken. So, we know that we're not really in line with a lot of people on some of these things, but generally this just gives us a sort of overview. And let's see, there was one more thing I was going to bring up. Oh, so we did not make this tier list. It was made by someone on tier list, the whole tier list tiermaker.com thing. And I was going to give them credit. I'm still willing to, but they use their real name, and I just don't want to. I don't know if I'd want to say that to that. I don't want to know if I want to say someone's real name out loud on like the internet. So I'm kind of just. I'm like, if by some miracle they see this and they get mad that we're using like technically. I feel like most people don't get mad if you use their tier maker stuff, but I was gonna make my own at first, and then I realized it was already made. So I was like, okay, we'll just use this one. I just feel it's a bit iffy if I give them credit, and I'm using their real name. So whoever made this, thank you so much. We will be using it for our own content. We are scum. All right, so uh,
no,
I
I'm innocent, bitch. I'm number one.
you're just complicit.
Hmm.
Well, so anyway,
Yeah.
let's start with what we know is going to be. How we generally do this is we give like one S tier and one F tier. So the I think we know which one's going to be S tier for us, Pike.
Yes.
All right, let's see
Yes.
if I could find it in here. Uh, let's see. That's
It's
the
in order.
I know it's in order, but I'm trying to like. That's the Hand of the Prophet. So here we go. Duet. It was confusing me because Odo was on the cover. So
Wow.
yeah, obviously I've said my piece about Forsaken. I love Forsaken, but Duet is just Duet's the best. It's very clear what they were trying to do, and in thinking about this earlier today, I realized Dax is even worse, and we'll get to that when we talk about Dax.
Oh God.
I thought of sort of a new little element here, and guess what? We're talking about right next. We're gonna give our F tier, which is for me it's Dax. I don't know about you if
Oh,
you wanted to put Move Along
oh yeah,
Home.
Dax.
Yeah,
Dax
so
is Dax.
I was thinking about this. You know, so Dax when we reviewed it, we talked about Dax doesn't make any sense in how she's not defending herself. So on one hand, she is the best. The best justification we can have is that she's not defending herself because in defending herself, she might encourage people to look into it more. In doing so, it might uncover the truth about the whole conspiracy. Right. The whole point is people believe that their war hero united them and saved their planet from endless civil war, and
Mhm.
in maintaining that lie that he was this hero and that the wife was faithful to him and that she can be this symbol of his everlasting presence. You know, that's something that Dax wanted to maintain, when in reality the wife had been unfaithful with Curzon Dax. And Jadzia, being aware of this, seemed willing to accept fault. Now, you
Mhm.
might be kind of getting why thinking about Duet made me a little bit more bitter towards Dax. So
Yeah.
in Duet, Maritza is trying to pretend to be guilty of a crime that he did not commit so that he can bolster the Bajoran people and humble the Cardassians. And he has this whole plan
Mm.
that almost works were it not for his own slip of the tongue. He was just a file clerk. He's not like an espionage master. He made a mistake, and Odo snuffed it out and figured out who he really was. But, you know, ultimately, the goal there was I am trying to get you guys to accuse me of a crime that I didn't commit. In Dax,
Mm.
Curzon did not commit a crime. But if the truth gets out,
Yeah.
it's worse. So Jadzia is supposedly trying to take blame for it because she's not defending herself, even though there's hundreds we discussed it in that episode. Go watch that. There are hundreds of other defenses she can make that aren't about the nature of Curzon's innocence, such as the fact that as a different person, she is not like guilty of his crimes.
Yeah.
So she doesn't make any defenses. And again, you can maybe justify she's not making defenses because in doing so, she encourages people to look into it. But she doesn't explain this to Benjamin. As a result, he looks into it and uncovers the truth. She probably could have explained this to him and told him she wants to suffer for this because she believes it's for the greater good. I don't know if Sisko would have gone along with that, but it might have been at a certain point she'd have to have accepted that as the outcome. Like, I can't stop him from investigating. I have to bring him in on it and hope he sides with me. But
Mhm.
she just basically Dax does the thing that Maritza was trying to do, but she just does it so much worse. And again, it ruins her character. The court scenes makes no sense. The plot is very nonsensical. It's a bad episode. It's hard to watch. So
Yeah.
for us, Dax is F tier, and I think
Yep.
that is a good judge of where most of ours are going to fall. Why don't we go with
Yeah.
start from one now? So uh,
Okay.
Emissary.
Yeah.
So Emissary is a
Uh.
two-parter. We at the time gave it an A.
Yeah. So it's I kind of give it the break of like it is the first episode. They're still trying to figure things out, and so if there's anything odd in it, it's like, oh, it's the first episode. Well, first two episodes, right? And you can kind of do that with all the episodes here in season one, unless it's just absolutely egregious, like how bad it is, like Dax and its issues, especially with it in the same. But Emissary, I would probably still keep it at an A. Um, but it's one of those things like, besides the standout moments, like like it's mostly just setting the tone and like the foundation of the series, right? And that's all it needs to do. It does that just fine. It's good. And it has the standout moments as a bonus. So it's like, yeah, for first episode, it's an A. If it was elsewhere, like some of the same content was elsewhere, like the moments, like the equivalent episode in like a middle of season two would probably be a B if I were to say. But here it's an A. Like within the context of it being the first two episodes and it needs to set this up, it's an A.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Uh,
so I give it an A. You know, almost. I don't agree with you 100%. I think, you know, it obviously has to do a lot. It introduces a lot of characters, and the benefit it gets from that is it kind of functions almost like a roller coaster in a sense, right? Like, here's a
mhm,
new character, here's a new situation, here's a new like dynamic of the setting, and that can be very fun to
mhm,
watch. But it also serves the purpose of establishing your characters and basically creating an outline for your series. You know, when you're presenting
yeah,
this is effectively a pilot, although I don't believe it was ever really presented as a pilot, right? Like pilots are usually very different from the core series because you're proposing this to some sort of
Yeah.
studio, but they knew this was happening, so it's not really a pilot. It's too long really to be a pilot. And
Yeah.
what you get though is here's everything you're going to need to know about how this series is going to function. We get great characterization for Kira, great characterization for Sisko, good characterization for Odo. We reintroduce O'Brien in a new context. We get an interesting conflict between Sisko and Picard. We get all the stuff with the wormhole aliens, which is very interesting. I think some of it might be a little bit up to scrutiny, but otherwise, absolutely, I think it's a phenomenal episode, and I put it in A tier. Every time,
Okay.
like, until we started doing this, every time I went back to Emissary, I was always surprised at how good it is. Because again, you have that feeling of like, yeah, it's so early on in the series, there's so little to build off of. It's like that doesn't stop them. They just go right out and do a very good job.
Hmm.
All right, so
Yeah.
let's look at the IMDb rating for Emissary.
Uh,
IMDb gives Emissary a 7.5 out of 10.
I love how you told me to pull it up, but now
Well,
you're the one.
I can also do it. I can also do it. I feel it helps if we're both there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
to make a point, and we didn't talk about them before because I figured we'd just get to them at the time. But Duet is a 9.0, right? So a 9 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess a 7.5 is a respectable score. I mean, really, like I'm putting Duet definitely in the high S tier, and Emissaries in the high A tier for me. So yeah, I guess we're kind of in line with that. But this is kind of giving an idea of where we are with all of this. And then just to piss me off, Dax is a 7.1.
God, God, you people, you need help. G- go commit psychological evaluation, please. Like, you need the
Jesus.
evaluation. Like, yeah, I am harsh towards the like. I'm just some weirdo reviewing DS9 episodes. I was like, I might be that, but you all actually like Dax, and I legitimately cannot respect you as a human being now. Like, you you deserve all the awful things. Anyways, off of my high horse. Um,
All right, so I have it written in my notes very stupidly as a DS9 season 1 episode 3, although it's the second episode. Um,
yeah,
and this is let's see, I want to make sure.
uh,
Yeah, this is
past
the past
prologue,
prologue.
aka
I'm just
Kira.
making sure because I didn't write past prologue on there. So,
Mm-hmm.
past prologue is the Kira episode, and it
Well, one
is.
of them. Yeah,
We'll say that again.
it's one of them. It's like the first
Well,
one,
I know
but
100%, but I guess what I was going to say is, this is their first step after their premiere, right? The first episode mostly is about Cisco. Oop, I got some noise outside. I hope that's not going to come in on the mic. It's mostly about Cisco, but generally it involves everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 2 immediately pivots to a Kira focused episode, and I don't think that's unintentional.
Mm.
Kira is the protagonist of the biggest episode in the season. Kira is probably in most ways easily said to be the main character of at least season 1. So much stuff revolves
Yeah,
around her. I wouldn't say she's the main character. I would never say there's any main character. Even when I say like Cisco's the main character to some people, that's always with the caveat of like, well, it's an ensemble cast. People just
yeah.
always think of the captain as the main character. But here, I think in season 1, Kira's the main character, and that's very intentional. Episode 1 or episode 2, they give Kira the like main character position, and this is the one where she
Like,
basically has to come to terms with she's no longer a soldier.
well,
She's more of a diplomat now.
well, no, no, no. She's still a soldier, but she's not a guerrilla fighter soldier anymore. She's not like in the swamps and such as
I mean,
she like
I
has
mean,
like.
I don't know. I kind of disagree. Like, I mean, she's a soldier in the sense of like she carries a phaser and she's going to do battle when it's necessary, but she's not being sent to war. She's not being sent to the battlefield. Her position is
Yes,
as
but
a
she's stationed.
liaison between the Federation and Bajor.
She is effectively the Riker in the spot, like, and I would call both of them like, at the end of the day, it's like you are a military vet. Like, she is on a military installation serving,
Oh well, yeah,
basically as.
sure. I mean, by that same metric, I simply mean like, yes, the highest ranking members of the military are still members of the military, and they still are going to fight if need be. But her duties expand far beyond soldier to the point where it's like it's not really a great descriptor of her anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, past prologue. At the time, we gave it a B minus. I distinctly remember there's a lot of maybe questionable character sort of stuff here. I do feel like there's a little bit like, I feel like Kira needs a little bit more to start getting me to believe these decisions. All in
Mm-hmm.
all, it wasn't a bad episode. I didn't write down that it like I couldn't say this is skippable because again, it's so important for Kira. But there was like some
Mm-hmm.
contrivances and some plot holes that really just stopped this episode from being great. It's good though, I think.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
so
it's a it's a B for me.
it's an
It's
easy B.
like
There's not anything that's there wasn't ever anything that really ruined the episode for me. Which as we'll sort of explain as we get there, C tier like B tier is good but not great, and by that I kind of mean there's problems, but generally the episode is not going to be negatively impacted for some of these problems. C tier is we're getting very much in the realm of like there are some story breaking elements to this episode. There's still good parts, but there's definitely story breaking elements.
I
And
watch the way I treat it is B's good. I can watch it and be like, yeah, I'm glad I watched this. C it's like, this was an episode. It
yeah, I
was
guess
certainly
I'm trying to
one
think
of
of
the
it more from like a little bit more of an objective point of view here. But yeah, I mean that's kind of how it also goes for me. Is like C is oftentimes one I would rather not watch if I can avoid.
mm, mm-hmm,
All right,
mm-hmm.
so we are now in the next one, which is A Man Alone. I want to make
It's
sure I have
the
the
Odo
proper
episode.
episode. Yes, the Odo episode. I want to make sure this is the right one because hold on, let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I listed two things as episode 4 in my notes. I'm trying to figure out which one it is.
It's a man alone,
No, I
and
know it's A
then
Man
after
Alone,
that,
but it's the this is the one with Odo gets
oh,
accused of the murder of a Bajoran smuggler.
yep,
So
uh,
yeah, okay. So I
yeah,
found these are the right notes. All right, so you know, before we do that, the IMDb episode for past prologue also puts it at a 7.1. So they say it's the same level
you.
as Dax.
Oh, you people are animals. You deserve, like, God, you deserve the cross. You
Oh
deserve,
my
like,
God, Pike, Jesus.
you are all just Spartacus yelling, "I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus," and I'm just looking at my fucking tribune here, like, get the wood and the nails. It's like,
All right.
yeah, just
Well, before Pike goes on a holy crusade here against IMDb reviewers, let's get to the rating for this episode. So, in my notes, I have
Mhm,
us at for A Man Alone as a B plus, which for past prologue I gave it a B minus at the time. And
mhm,
most of my justification written down here is like, look, we get a lot of good Quark and Odo scenes. This is when Keiko starts the school. Obviously, it's going to be very important later. We get some lore on
mhm,
the Ferengi stuff. We get some good relationship building between Jake and Nog. Again, stuff that's going to be very useful later on. And we get a lot of good character work for Odo. I think the reason this episode is rated so high for me is because we get a huge, like, again, episode 2 is a Kira episode. This one is an Odo episode. It is
mhm.
really building these two characters as some pillars of this series, and they are. Like Kira's relationship to the Bajorans ties in all those plot lines to a primary character of the story. And once we start getting into some of the stuff later on in the series, Odo's character is so pivotal that you cannot not like you can't have it so we
Yes.
don't understand who he is as a person. And
It's like,
go on.
go ahead.
No, no, no.
No,
You go on.
I was just gonna say, like, oh, kind of like whenever I think of DS9, well, I do have a favorite, favorite characters that aren't these three. Like, oh, it's either Quark or Garrick, um, or no, not Nog or Garrick. It's like the main three that I always think of. Like, these are the three you're going to be dealing with in an episode usually, unless they like spotlight a character, are Cisco, Kira, Odo, because it's like these are the main three people who, if there's a problem on the station, they are involved somehow, right? And I think it's good to we got emissary that sets up Cisco, then we get past prologue sets up Kira, and then Odo being set up here. It's like they're setting up uh like so you know how in the original series the main three are Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Like that's what everyone thinks of. They're the main. three of like if there's conflict in the leadership, it's usually between them, but it's also them resolving the issues. And then TNG kind of has the same thing with to a lesser extent, but it's still there of like who's going to be focused usually. Like what's the main ongoing through line? It's Picard, Riker, and I would say Data. It's like yeah, these are the three where you're focusing on the transformation more and more. Like they're actually maybe more, but basically it's like they're immediately setting up. These are the three you need to watch the whole series because they're the ones who are going to be involved with everything that goes on,
No, 100%.
everything.
And I think
Yeah.
the reason I think I give this episode, a B plus is while we get a lot of good stuff with Quark or not Quark, a lot of good stuff with Odo, a lot of good stuff with uh like his investigation. There are certain things that I feel are contrivances. The
Hmm.
guy's plot, because this is the one where a man basically fakes his death to
He
try and perform a
uses a
crime.
clone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
he
the
uses a
clone.
clone of himself to make it look like Odo killed him in a sealed room, and it's a very like, oh, I guess you could do that, but it's also like, huh, and we never see this cloning technology again. Like, like, but like, eh, eh,
Yeah, I mean, and,
like,
and there was a few world building like issues I remember we had because the guy like there's the question of the clone's sentience apparently, and I want to point this out because this is kind of interesting when we discuss the passenger later on. This clone was released and allowed to live freely.
yeah. Wait, doesn't that mean that the guy who plotted against Odo should not only be charged with trying to frame someone else for a crime, but be charged with
Yeah,
basically
because
murder because
initially what he did is he made a clone of himself, killed the clone.
Mhm.
Uh, then when they found some more data and material, like they found basically like this substance, which to figure out what it was, Bashir started growing it in his lab, and then it turns into a full
Mm.
person of Ibudan. So they basically make a second clone.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah, I believe he is charged with murder. He wasn't trying
yeah.
to frame
He should be.
anyone. He was killing his clone to fake his own death, and I guess he was technically trying to frame. I don't know. I can't remember if he
No,
was
he was
actually
trying
trying to.
to. He was trying. So
Yeah, he
remember,
was
he
definitely
came
trying to frame
specific.
Odo. That's correct. Yes.
That was his main motivation because he had no other reason to be on the station. He very purposely like set up the confrontation in Quark's bar at the beginning with Odo because Odo reacts very viscerally to his presence because he fundamentally finds Ibudan disgusting for what he did, not
Yeah.
for just smuggling. Like he could bear the guy being a smuggler. Sure, he's a criminal, but he gets it. But the fact he would just let people die if they couldn't pay him when they were in need and they weren't like it's just like yeah that's what Odo and that got the guy sent to prison for a couple years by the Cardassians, but then he was released by the provisional government and he wanted revenge against Odo because I mean it's the guy who sent you to fucking prison under the Cardassians, of course you want revenge. um
No,
like
100%.
if
And
he
go on.
yeah, if he didn't like have that motivation, he would not have done this because he was a free man and was
No,
seen as a hero by
I guess I
everyone.
understand that. I was just trying to remember if he had a different motivation for faking his death because there could be any number of reasons a smuggler will want to fake
Mhm.
his death. And then he was also like, well, I can also blame Odo for it. But that's neither here nor there. We gave the episode a
Mhm.
B mostly for its character work, not so much for its plot.
Yeah.
But
Oh
then we
wait, we
move.
need to get
Yep,
we need to give credit to Past Prologue because it had Garrick for the first time.
that's true.
Garrick.
It had one of the only two Garricks, the only Garrick scene in this whole season.
Well, not a scene, but it was like, oh, he was in the whole episode of like because remember the
No,
plot
I
there.
believe he
The
only
guy was
has one scene.
no, he does the introduction
Oh,
with
true, true. You're right. You're
shoot,
right.
but then the two the Dora sisters come. And like, there's all that plotting and such, and Gary really like, ooh, this could go bad, and
No,
it will
you're
not
correct.
look good for
I mean,
me.
that's
I
another
need.
reason why we
Mhm.
give like I think we give past prologue a good number of boosts, even though there's some plot stuff. Again, character work. Again, whenever we praise DS9, it's almost always for its phenomenal character work, and
Mhm.
it's something that you can expand upon and build upon so much more in a series that is less focused on just pure syndication and more on a more continuous story. But now we get to what I think is our well, first off, Do you want to guess what they gave A Man Alone on IMDb? Don't look at it if you have it pulled up.
Oh, I'm gonna be pissed. Let me guess. They actually put it at a 6, didn't they?
You're close. 6.8.
Oh my god, I'm going to. You people are animal. Like, oh, get the Leggett, get the
Well, so one thing I would agree,
Tribune.
right, is we agree it's worse than Emissary, right? So it seems like our like again, a lot of these these are mass people doing it, right? So you're generally going to have stuff scale down over time as more and more people give like worse and worse ratings and stuff. But, generally
Titus get
we put
Titus
this
get the
below
cross. Get
we
the
put this
cross, Titus.
we put this well below Emissary, and it's hard to remember. I think we do put this above past prologue, but generally they're both in that B tier.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
so
but
I'm
whatever.
just saying. I'm just
Babel.
saying. I don't think it's great. And now we get to Babel, and this was really our first like big critique of the season. There
Yeah.
is. I want to point out when we watch this episode, the plot is fairly tight. There's a few bits and pieces we can kind of criticize, but
Mm-hmm.
like it's not. There's a few issues with the plot, but generally it's because of the nature of this disease. It really hurts your ability to express character. No one can talk. No one can have meaningful conversations and back and forths. I mean, let's be
Okay.
fair.
Okay.
The best episode of
But
this season is a dialogue between two people.
okay. But there are two characters who can talk in it, and we
True.
get a great moment from it.
Odo and
Odo and
Quark.
Quark,
Yes,
and
Odo and Quark
Quark
are
being
top
like,
tier.
I'm pretty sure I can make this work. What do you mean you're pretty sure? Energize! And so just
I
ah
feel like half of that didn't come
ah.
through Discord, so I mean, no one's gonna hear it at home. It just sounded like you were making random noises.
Okay, so when Quark has to teleport Odo down to the fucking like
Ah,
one
yes, that
thing.
scene. It's like, yeah, you said you worked on as a transporter. It's like, well, I worked near a transporter.
Energize! It's just
Yep,
like,
it's
oh.
a pretty good scene. It's a pretty good scene. Um,
Mhm.
but we gave this episode a C plus at the time with the denotion of it's
Yeah.
skippable. There is nothing really
Yeah.
of value in this episode.
Well,
Admittedly,
besides that
the
moment.
best thing we can kind of say is it is better than I'm trying to remember the name of the episode. It is better than Dramatis Personae, and that it more
Oh.
accurately presents it more accurately presents how a disease would be handled on a space station.
Yeah.
So I do want to
Yeah.
give it maybe some credit for that. I'm gonna keep it in the high C's though, because again, we get nothing for character. We get nothing for like again, we get like Odo and Quark. That's kind of it. We get some stuff with Cisco, but even then, it's like there's that one scene I will always highlight, which is Cisco having a emotional heart to heart with his son, and because his son has the disease, we know his son can't understand any word of it, and it's kind of just like, it
But
really
he can
feels like it's.
feel it.
I don't think he could. This would be the equivalent of me looking at you, Pike, and being like, uh, you know, snow sled, Christmas tree, happiness, goodbye. And it's like, what
Bah.
did you say? It's like, but it was really meaningful. It's like, shut up. this
No,
this this
no.
ep- this episode this episode turns language into modern art. There's meaning behind it, maybe, but there's no form or structure.
No. There's meaning behind it because they have to put a plaque right next to it that clearly details what the artist was going for because that's the only way it can be understood. God, I hate
Jeez.
modern art.
All right. Well, I don't hate modern art. I was mostly making a joke. I do like some elements of modern art, but that's a different discussion. Look,
Well, yeah,
Babel is our
the
first C.
ones that don't.
Admittedly, it's a C
Mhm.
plus. I give it a fairly decent C. Like I think I was on the cusp of maybe a B, but generally I couldn't give it more than a C at the time. Now, Pike, do you want to guess what
Mhm.
IMDb says about this episode?
Oh God, let it be an 8.
Why would you want it
I
to be an
looked.
8?
I just want to be fucking stupid.
All right. So, well,
I'm
it's
so
7. It's 7. So they say it's better than A Man Alone, but slightly worse than past prologue.
I I uh, I mean that's not the most like it's wrong, but it's not offensively like I like. Oh my god, I need to move these numbers around because it actually agitates me because they have it all out of order and like their values. Like, oh my lord, uh you know what? You know what? Nero didn't go far enough in his persecutions.
All right. Well,
Nero didn't go far.
I don't want to comment on anything about the history stuff, but I'm gonna hope that you're not being too bigoted here, Pike, and you're not gonna get us canceled so soon in our internet careers.
No, no. You see. It's fine. The group that Nero persecuted would be people that he would be applauded for persecuting. Like,
Anyway,
remember?
Captive Pursuit. Captive Pursuit.
Mhm.
So, um, we gave
O'Brien.
yes, this is a O'Brien focused episode, and we do get some interesting interactions with entities from the other side of the wormhole. We meet Tosk, and we sort of meet
Yep.
some of their culture. That Tosk is a creature basically bred to hunt, and he's on the run. He believes it's his duty, not just his duty. He believes it's his life's fulfillment is to be hunted properly.
Mhm.
And O'Brien rescues him. O'Brien then sort of like lets him go. O'Brien sort of violates some rules here. I will distinctly always remember the scene where uh, O'Brien, tries to sort of maybe weasel out of the criticisms, like, "Oh, I didn't let him escape. I didn't do any of that." And then Cisco's like catches him on it, but at the same time, like, while he admonishes O'Brien, Cisco then kind of leans like, "Yeah, I'm still kind of glad you did it." Like, it's
Yeah.
that
Like,
idea of like, as your superior, I do have to say you're going to be like punished for this, and I don't approve. But as a friend, yeah, good work on you, man. So,
as a friend and as a human being, good job. Good job.
oh, and I
Good
mean,
job.
I feel like
Good
this is
job.
probably not the start of it, but this is one of the many scenes that I feel like is very undercut in the series, where we see a good, healthy dynamic between like Cisco and O'Brien. Just like
Yeah. It's
they have you realize the more they interact, they're very similar people in the way they think, the way they behave, and all that sort of stuff. So, you know,
well,
we
yeah.
gave
Like,
this episode.
remember,
Oh,
uh, remember, Cisco was originally engineering, if I
yeah,
recall,
yeah.
and yeah, he's very much like, yeah, if like as his mentor that we meet later on said, when I first met you, you were more interested in basically playing with ship designs and such. Uh, but I molded you, and you know, I taught you everything I knew about leadership. And it's like, yeah, without that man's influence, Cisco would have been happy as like at most a commander,
Well,
like.
he might have been stuck in the. He might have been an engineer. He might have been a yellow shirt. You know.
Well, yeah, but you can still remember, if I recall, even Geordi in the movies eventually commands ships, and it's because it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
and like,
those are very
but
special though, because I think he ends up commanding like specific engineering teams. That's
well, yeah, that's
it's
that's
always a
what I'm
little
saying.
confusing. No, I get what you're saying, but I guess I just mean like people naturally are probably going to move into command as they sort of face. The heroes of the story are going to move into command because they're going to be making the assertive points, but the average person probably does not, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Either way, uh, so let's see. For Captive Pursuit, we gave this a B at the time. We still denoted it as skippable,
Hmm.
and
Um,
I think we said it was a little bit better than past prologue, only in the sense of like it's a little tighter. There's a lot going on. We see a lot of new things, and there's some good character interactions. But generally, it's a very simple episode that's not super pertinent to other things, and it doesn't do anything super. It doesn't do anything great. It just does a lot of things pretty good.
yeah, but it doesn't really have to do like I. We kind of have the forgiveness of like, oh, this is an established character, and we're basically, clarifying like, yeah, this is still like the O'Brien, I think that's okay for just a
Oh
single
no, sure.
episode to
I'm
establish
not
like,
criticizing it in that sense. I guess I just mean like, if we wanted everything to be A's, what you would need to add to this episode is a lot more character work. And just
mhm,
unfortunately, because of the characters you're dealing with, and like and the focus on the plot, it really can't get some of that character work in. And the plot's fine.
mhm,
It's very straightforward. It's nothing amazing. On the Olympic dive scale, it's a pretty simple dive that they nail pretty well. So,
mhm.
I put this probably a little bit above past prologue, but I think I put it below A Man Alone. Like I'm kind of organizing my tier list as a, I put the ones higher up on the list, even if they're in the same tier. I'll put it higher up on the list by moving it more to the left.
Yeah.
So, all right, guess what we're on now, Pike? Oh
Oh
wait, I'm sorry.
God.
Before we do that, Captive Pursuit. Do you want to guess what it has?
8.
Well, it is the highest rated episode so far at 7.6, excluding
Really?
Duet, which we skipped to. So, uh, it is the second highest episode according to IMDb.
Really? That is. It might be because it's O'Brien and everyone likes an O'Brien Must Suffer episode.
Yeah, I mean, like I
But
said, it's a fairly solid plot. I don't think there's anything to really miss there. You have
mhm,
an interesting dynamic between O'Brien and Tosk, but the episode, like, something like a lot of times the things that we really praise about these episodes are a lot of the more subtle things that we've noticed. They're like, wow, you never really realize how much it develops a single character to the point of like, there might be an episode that focuses on Cisco and you realize how much it tells you about Cisco. A lot of people might not catch on to that stuff as much. So they're not going to add
mhm,
that in the course of their like evaluation. Whereas this episode, very simple, very straightforward, done fairly well. But it's
mhm,
just it doesn't really do too much. So we give it a solid B, and I understand exactly why it's rated fairly high on this scale at least.
mhm.
But now we're on Q-less. So
This
um
episode.
yeah, Q-less. Let's see here. I just want to make sure I get my notes for this out. Da, da, da.
You.
There it is.
uh,
So Q-less. Um, it's the only Q episode we have for DS9, which is probably a good thing.
yeah.
I
Well, I
think.
mean,
Go on.
one bad episode does not kill a concept. Like they kept Dax around despite Dax the episode.
Oof. Well, so I
But
mean, I'm not saying that in a sense, but this episode is very
but
weird. It focuses on the character mostly from TNG to sort of like you've called it a backdoor pilot before.
it, fe- it feels like a backdoor pilot because it's like most of the focus is on these two like basically fucking about trying like Q being a malicious god who doesn't want to lose his mortal like I would not say partner but plaything at this uh but the argument could be made like, oh, he just doesn't know how to show his appreciation and such for his moral companions, but it's like, yeah, but it's still like very like it there's not. And then there's a separate issue with the crew that they're dealing with that only occasionally intersect, and they don't even really
Well,
intersect at the end
it's kind of even
because
worse than that because the problem that the crew is dealing with is something that they don't figure out what it is until the very end, like literally the last two scenes, and
hmm
they solve it immediately. It's like the entire episode is just them kind of bumbling around trying to figure out how to solve the problem, and then like, oh,
hmm
it's this weird energy buildup that's currently in Quark's bar, and they find out it's one of the artifacts that
hmm
I forget what her name Vash. It's one of the artifacts she brought, and it turns
mm
out it's like an egg for some sort of cosmic manta ray. Like
ah
so, it's like oh they quickly grab it and they throw on one of their badges and says oh lock onto my badge and warp it off the station, and they do that and it's solved. Like it's like oh crap, get it off the station. That's all we need to do. And I mean that's fine, but I think our
hmm
biggest issue with this episode, from according to my notes, is like, at this point, and this is a problem in TNG too, although it's not always acknowledged the same. It's not acknowledged in TNG either, but it's a problem there too, which is Q is Q is a he's killed multiple Starfleet officers. Like
yeah
he's responsible for a lot of people's deaths. He's responsible for a lot of pain and suffering. He's not simply a cosmic trickster. He has caused people to
hmm
die. And as far as we know, he didn't bring them back. And if he did bring them back, that's an entirely different question of is it really the same person? That's a different conversation. But there's no evidence he ever brought these people back, and he caused people to die. Now,
hmm
admittedly, if you looked at him from that series and said, when he threw the Enterprise to the Borg, it was meant to solely be a lesson, right? It's a harsh lesson, but it's going to be a lesson you need to learn. That could be one way to
hmm
interpret Q, right? Q is like he acts like a trickster, but he is like secretly willing to give harsh lessons to humanity to benefit them. And then if people treated him that way, that would work. But the way Q is treated in this is they just sort of treat him as an annoyance. And I'm like, no, he's not an annoyance. He's
Mhm.
killed people. I don't know if you could get rid of him, but you need to have a procedure in place on how to deal with him. Cisco punching Q would unironically be like as badass as a moment as it is. It would unironically be like if I was on Cisco's crew and I saw him do that, I'd sit there and be like, we're gonna die. Like Q is gonna throw us into the
Goodness.
freaking sun or something. Like because he's been known to do that. The reports we talked about all the people who die because of him.
Yep.
And of course,
Like
then they mention
Q.
the other things like there's like there's an entire alien species that says that you blew up our sun or you killed a ton of us and we hate you now and then he brushes that off, which makes sense for him, but other characters
Yeah.
shouldn't. So it's just
Yeah.
like I think so much of our issue is like Q is like it's not a great episode. It's not super entertaining. It has a lot of these like small issues and the plot's not great. It focuses on characters we don't like and ultimately it really starts to raise the question of you're not treating Q the proper way that you would have to treat him. And for us, we gave this episode a D.
Yeah. It's very much just like
I
Q
mean,
Q Q. You
there's some good
usually
character
I
stuff
like
here and there's not a horrible stuff. And again, like who's the actor who plays Q? I forget his name all the time.
John Delancey. John
Yeah,
Delancey.
John Delancey. He's great. Like he acts very well. He knows the role and he does it well. The problem is,
Yeah.
unfortunately, no one seems to want to write Q as the actual malevolent god that he is. They want to write him
Yeah.
as this cosmic trickster that everyone kind of like rolls their eyes at, like, oh, we have to deal with Q again. It's like, no, no, no. Like this man
Yeah.
has left like widows and widowers in his wake. Like you don't
Yeah.
get to just roll your eyes at him. You have to be like, no, this is a red alert. Q is in
It's
the
all
system.
the only time it should be treated that way is after all the time we spend with Q and Voyager, because they're just used to it by that point. I'm just like, yep, this is Q. This is a
Again,
Q day.
even then,
They're
like my criticism with that in Voyager is it's a little bit different, but Q is definitely a bigger role in Voyager. And I mean, if we ever decide to do reviews of some things in Voyager, um, there might be some element of like maybe they redeem him sort of. Again, like I could kind of acknowledge that this is just how you have to behave with him, but at the same time,
yeah.
it's just like
I
I don't know. Again, this would be just the equivalent of a mass murderer who can't be killed, just goes around murdering people, and then he says, "Hey, but like, do you want to play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh for funsies?" It's like, bro,
there. Okay, you say that there is literally a manga like there where the main villain is like, "Oh yeah, do you like One Piece?" And the girl he's talking to is like,
I know
"You
which one
just
you're
killed
talking
my
about.
prime," and he's like, "Okay, but do you like One Piece?"
Yes,
Like,
and I like you
it's
kind of mentioned
like,
he's a villain, and I've seen clips from that, and I'm like, yeah, he's supposed to like come across like deranged. Um,
yeah,
and again, it's like that's just my issue is the universe does not. We've had this issue with DS9 with other things too. Like it's not just DS9, but we've had this issue in DS9 because we praise it so much. We have to acknowledge the problems. There are very much like world building elements that the writers just do not understand or actually at play. Again, the one I always bring
uh,
up about DS9 is why doesn't the Federation treat this as the amazing discovery it is and have like 10 Federation ships flying around this wormhole at all periods of time? Like,
so yeah, it might
so
be no, no, no. I did just think of something for that. So you know how they have the treaty with the Cardassian? It could be one of those things like unless the Federation is willing to get sneaky beaky with it, they're not allowed to have a certain number of ships like above a certain number of ships, above a certain tonnage and such.
so
Because that
I understand that. I have two counters to that. Uh,
hmm
Again, this is a little bit of a different conversation, and I won't get too off topic, but the counters to that are one, fuck the treaty. This is literally the most important scientific discovery in the history of the Federation. Like
okay, okay.
this
But
isn't just like this is something that should have like unironically a war broke out over this thing. So we know
yeah.
the importance of this, But my issue is more in the sense of like, no, Federation, this is your space, right? Like, here's what you do: you go to Bajor, you say, hey, red stamp everything. Congratulations, you're part of the Federation now. We're putting like a space station in there that we built with our defense mechanisms, and we have like 5 ships flying around there. It's not a matter of
Yeah.
no. You don't use a Cardassian hand-me-down station anymore. Immediately from season 1, you should be like, we're building a new station here. Why? Well, before this was a hull-bunk system that we might include in the Federation. Now it's the most important place in the galaxy. The other issue
Yeah.
is we don't know what's in the other end of that wormhole. We know what's in the Delta Quadrant, the Borg. What's in the Gamma Quadrant? It could also be the Borg.
I mean, yeah, like yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. You need to remember, it's the Admiralty of Starfleet. Like it comes up later in this series, but let's just say the writers, like the way they write the Admiralty, they themselves do not have a positive view of the
I
Admiralty.
kind of disagree with that, but that's a different conversation. And again, I just want to make the point of the problem is this series wants to sort of be frontier adventures in space, but
Hmm.
they write a plot line that really can't tolerate that. And again, that's a very different conversation. I want to kind of get a little bit back on track. The issue with Q is the way you've presented him. The world building implications need to be set. In fact, unironically, this episode would be made a lot better if the second Q is found. They like pull out the what to do when Q is present handbook,
Yeah, we
because
have regulations about this.
like you would literally
Like,
have
yeah.
entire teams of people who just are just like, yeah, what's your job? Well, we are an organization within the Federation, like the equivalent of like another military branch, and our entire purpose is studying Q because
Yeah.
he is a cosmic threat. Anyway,
Yeah.
we did
I'm
not give
trying to
this episode a
remember.
good rating.
Yeah, question is Q technically omnipotent? Like, what is the limitation of his awareness of the
So
universe?
they actually make a point. I'm reading the IMDb right now. Q, the Enterprise D's consistent omnipotent annoyance. That just
Yeah.
means he's all powerful. Now, I don't. It's not. He is not omniscient because he does not
Okay.
know how people will act.
Okay. Yeah. So I was wondering, like, can you even really plan for Q? Because if he's omniscient, like I thought, wait, isn't
Well, I
he
mean, I don't think you could
omniscient?
do
If
anything about
so,
it, but I guess like it's just the issue of like every commander and captain would be trained on how to behave around Q to result in like the least amount of threats. Like Picard would have been interviewed to hell to be like, okay, we need to study every interaction you had with him to understand his behavior. You'd
Mhm.
have psychologists breaking down his personality for the sole purpose of saying, how do we best diffuse any situation you're in? And we train people to be like, when Q appears, this is how you act. This is what you say. This is how you say it, but you do it in a way that's natural.
Mhm.
Either way, not a good episode. It's D. Do you want to know what the IMDb rating is for this?
7.
6.7.
Okay.
So
I
this is
okay.
presently, other than
The lowest.
this is presently the lowest rated episode. Not the lowest rated episode of the season, but it is presently the lowest rated episode that we've encountered. So
Mhm.
that is appropriate. All right, now
Yeah.
technically now we're at Dax. So Dax is next. Has been given a 7.1. We think it's far worse than that. We've already explained. But then
Uh.
we are on episode 8, The
uh
Passenger. So The Passenger is another questionable episode. A lot of the
um.
character work really kind of focuses on a new character who's very one note. Um, but
Mhm.
generally, when going through this episode, there's there's really nothing plot issues wise. There's just not really any
Mhm.
character stuff that you can kind of dig into. I mean, we definitely put it down as a skippable episode. It's not great. You get some stuff with
Mhm.
Odo. That's nice. That's kind of it. We get some stuff. It's mostly a Bashir episode, so this is kind of Bashir's first focused episode, and it's very unfortunate that for half the episode he's technically not behaving as himself.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, it's weird. This episode plus Dramatis Personae have a similar theme that I don't like them because characters are out of character.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
well, no. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here, This isn't quite as bad as Dramatis Personae because this one just doesn't
Oh yeah, no, this
really
is
do
not bad in
enough.
that. This is not bad in that context. In the same context, there's
Yeah,
a different issue for
Drama.
Dramatis Personae.
Yeah, yeah. Persona is it's everyone except for Odo, and it's like, oh, we're no longer seeing how the crew react to one person changing, having to deal with it. It's now everyone's acting weird and out of character, and you don't know where the episode's gonna go except for Odo, and even Odo is a wild card because like, how does he
No,
react
yeah,
to
there's a
all of
million
this?
problems with that episode. We'll get to that, trust me. But with the passenger, you have okay plot stuff. There's some stuff that works. There's some stuff that doesn't. It's it's very much a middling episode. I think we gave it. Unfortunately, I did not write it down. This is my fault. So we'll have to review the episode that we made for this. But we might be wrong with our full evaluation right here. I think I'm saying we kind of gave the episode just a C minus, a skippable. It wasn't
Yeah,
like
I see.
terrible. It was just kind of like all right. And then like the worst thing about the episode,
The
which
legal consequences of just like
yeah, because
this guy who was scheduled.
if you don't remember, this guy was scheduled to die. He was scheduled to be executed. He died, and he put his entire personality on a brain chip that was then implanted into Bashir. When Bashir is rescued, they re-download the entire brain chip onto a drive, and then the Vantica is the criminal, but the woman who is basically like her life's mission is to end like or to stop him. She basically shoots it
Yeah.
with a phaser, and it's like okay, first off, there's we literally have an episode in the season where a clone is made of a criminal, and the clone is let go because they recognize that he's not the criminal. This is
Yeah.
a this is a brain wave like data of a person who existed,
Yeah.
but so it's not him. Now we could say, well, he did possess Bashir, and he was going to destroy the space station or DS9.
And
So
he's
that's
done
an
this
issue.
many times.
But guess
Like
what?
he's done this
That's a
repeatedly.
different thing he needs to be on trial for.
Yeah, but
Um,
the issue is so basically he tried to run and it's like, okay, generally if someone tries to run and they're going to resist arrest when they're being, basically called to their execution, it's like, okay, like we're just gonna shoot you here. Like
No,
and
100%.
it's
I guess I just like it comes across a little bit like ooh that's something that like ending the episode on that and saying it all worked out in the end. I'm sitting there like ooh no there'd be political ramifications to someone who is scheduled to be executed. Uh, Now it's a brain chip of that person. Oh, now that's the whole person that exists. It's him. It's destroyed on a Federation ship where it was not where even the original guy was not meant to be killed. So there's all these questions of like
yeah.
this is a major legal faux pas. But regardless, yeah, we gave it a C.
What?
It's not a great one.
No,
Honestly,
no, no. So
it
here's the
it's
thing.
better
Here's
than
the thing.
Babel.
Oh yeah, it's better than Babel. But what I was gonna say is Cisco can technically absolve himself and his crew because it's like we didn't shoot the brain chip and he attacked like he possessed one of our officers. It's on your officer, like the one who was transporting him for what happens. Like I have no jurisdiction
Well,
over
I guess
her.
I yeah, I just mean that like when she shoots it, it's like, "Oh, um you're going to need to file some reports, Cisco." And honestly, like she's probably going to be quite she probably wouldn't be arrested by her own people. But again, very different conversation. We should probably move on
Office.
to
Yes.
well, so do you want to know what the passenger was rated?
What was it rated?
6.4.
Oof. I
Yeah,
want to say
not
yeah,
great.
it's
I mean,
not that
yeah, I
bad.
don't disagree with that. I mean, again, we put it slightly better than Babel, and Babel got a 7. So
Hmm.
it's a little bit like okay. I mean, I guess we're not in line with the people on that when it comes to the general understanding of the series. But so far, we're not too far off from most people.
Call Hadrian, call Trajan, call Diocletian. They all need to
All
persecute
right,
you people.
all right. I know how I can get you off this train again. We're on Move Along Home now.
We have talked about it at length, and like I think we both agree it's gonna be a D. It's not as bad
Yep.
as Dax, but it has the same issue, a passenger, but greater. These people get away. Actually, it has an issue that came up in Captain Pursuit as well. We didn't discuss it here, but Captain Pursuit ends with those fuckers, fucking around on the not respecting territorial anything, and you'd be like, oh, when you toss it here, that means you consider it, obviously, basically the implicit thing. But
So
um,
that's actually that's a
and
little
there's
bit
no,
different, but that's a little bit different in Captive Pursuit. But
yeah, but what I'm saying is there's not quite consequences. It's like immediately, it's like, oh, they're just acting like this. It's like, yeah, immediately Cisco just need to be like, okay, everyone, mm, just fucking fire, like put their ship under targeting, and just flat out say, if you do not drop your weapons, we will leave you stranded here and we will kill you, like, or you will go to prison,
again,
like
that's a
you
different
need
issue.
to.
You're dealing with an entirely different
But
faction that, unironically, has technology better than them. There is
yeah,
a legitimate
anyway,
question there about being concerned. And here with Move Along Home, they just sort of let these guys get away with it. In fact, Quark is critiqued more so about his behaviors than
yeah, but
these weird gaming aliens are. So
yeah,
like even though they're the ones who, they didn't ever put anyone in danger, but they made it seem like they did.
yeah,
So
like the
it's
threat of violence is still a crime, you
they
idiots.
effectively kidnapped and imprisoned them. Um,
Yeah, and it's like not just like
yeah.
random
Oh,
civilians.
it would definitely be some
Federal.
level of
It's
assault and yeah,
yeah. It's even worse. It's Federation dignitaries basically that were hosting you.
yeah.
Like, holy shit! Immediately, it was like,
It's
yeah,
it's
you're blacklisted.
it's very bad, and you know everyone hates this episode. I'm not even gonna hide it. It's a 5.8. It is the lowest rated episode of this season. I don't know if it's of the whole series, but this is a pretty bad one. And
Yeah.
what I'm gonna
I
say
mean,
is the reason we put this lower than
besides
Dak. Go on.
besides it getting like the part where he gets shamed, when it's like, I'm sure he did some bad, but it's still like he is not the main criminal. Like, he's not the main factor here. I think Quark is good here. Like, I
Oh,
think
Quark
Quark
acts
is
acts
good
very
here.
well. I don't think anything's wrong with Quark in this episode. In fact, the
Yeah.
reason why this episode beats out Dax for me is because there is some good character work. I mean, excluding the crazy aliens, there's not really major plot holes. They have
Hmm.
absurd technology and they have like really screwed up morals, but I mean it
Hmm.
makes sense, I suppose. And then of course,
Hmm.
one of the things that people will often cite as the reason this episode is so hated is this was the most advertised episode of DS9 season 1.
Yeah.
They were
Yep.
apparently given a primetime spot to sort of like use this
Yep.
episode to advertise it to the most people ever. So this was for a lot of people at the time their first exposure to DS9. And it
And
was
their only exposure.
well, hopefully not, but yeah, if you see this and you think this is emblematic of the whole series, trust me, my man, this is not a good look. And mostly the reason why I think this episode is so
Yeah.
hated, justifiably so, is it's embarrassing.
Yep.
Dax at least has almost this presentation of a decent, like, if you weren't thinking about it and you just had Dax on in the background, it would appear every bit the average Star Trek episode, right? If you had
Right.
this episode in the background, you'd be like, why are they in this crazy, colorful world playing children's games, hopscotch, and singing? Like,
Yeah.
it's more obviously bad than Dax, but I think Dax
Yeah.
is definitively worse. So now
Honestly,
we
like,
have. Oh, go on.
uh, before left for Japan, I was trying to get my uncle, who's way more into Star Trek than me, to actually finally sit down and watch DS9. And the thing is, he's always like, "Yeah, I keep trying to start it, and but then I drop it." And I just asked him like, "Is it because of Move Along Home? You get to this episode, and it's like," and he sat there for a second, it's like, "Yes." It's like, yeah, yeah. It's so
Yeah,
just
that is one of the worst episodes. Like it's not a good
yeah,
episode of the series, and honestly, I think it's definitely more harmful than Dax is. For the average in terms of like DS9's popularity. In terms of the
oh yeah,
world, it's DS9. Dax is far worse. All
yeah.
right, so now we are at episode uh,
The
11,
Negus.
The Nagus. We gave this episode an A. Oh God, it's
I
just
can't do it,
so
Vlad.
this is the quintessential Ferengi episode, right? It's mostly a Quark episode, but really it's an episode for all Ferengi. And given how important the Ferengi are as one of like the major plot lines of the series, this is a necessary episode. It's a very good episode. We get a new character, we get an interesting plot. We get almost a Godfather esque, like we get a Godfather callback where people are basically begging Quark to be like to give them favor since he becomes the new Nagus. This episode is pretty good. It's pretty
We
top
also get
tier.
Nog and Jake. We're getting
Yeah,
Nog and Jake.
we get some good stuff with Nog and Jake. Um,
Yeah.
I think most of our what's the episode where Nog is teaching? Yeah, it's this one, right? Where Nog isn't allowed to go to school
Jake is
anymore. But we get
teaching
that really
Nog.
nice, yeah, and we get that really nice scene at the
Yeah.
end where Jake like breaks a meeting with his father, pisses Cisco Benjamin off, and then when he sees his son teaching Nog, you feel the pride off the guy. It's such a great father son dynamic that is built here. I wish they had done more with Jake because I think the relationship is not flawless but very good. And this is one of those moments where you kind of realize, it's like, damn, like you raised your son right. You raised your son right, Cisco. Like, and other than that, Quark is in top form. We get the Nagus, who's a fan favorite character. It's an A. Unfortunately, it can't be. I don't know if it's. Do you think it's better than Emissary? It might be.
Emissary has
Emissary,
to
like
be.
kind of like what we talk about with Emissary, where there's just a lot going on in Emissary. It's hard to do one thing good. So this episode's a lot more narrow, and I'm not gonna lie, I probably put it above the Emissary.
Yeah. This is a great introduction to like Quark and Ferengi society after the revamp of DS9, like DS9 does for them. Because, haha, we don't talk about the TNG portrayal of the Ferengi. It did not age well even in the 1980s and 90s. It
Well,
was
they gave
not
this
good.
episode. IMDb gave this episode a 7.
Just a 7?
Well, in all fairness, remember it gave Emissary a 7.5. So, look, there's no way to look at these ratings as any way of a cohesive understanding. Like over 2,000 people rated like almost each of these episodes, like 2.5 for most of them. Emissary has almost 5K ratings, so you're gonna get just the average of so many of these things. But yeah, I mean, I think this is probably one of our higher ranked A's. It might end up being our highest ranked A.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we are now at Vortex, episode
Yes.
12.
This one.
So this functions as another Odo episode where he meets a prisoner who some of my biggest critiques of this prisoner was his acting. It very much was very odd, and it doesn't really come across as like the actor knew how he was supposed to be acting. You can maybe kind of read into some of it, like, oh, don't you see he was like one step ahead? He's acting this way because it gets him what he wants. I'm like, yeah, sure. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I give it that much credit, but so yeah, like I don't know where we put this because I do like how it ends. I do like what Cisco does because really this is one of the bigger character studies of Cisco. He compromises on one of his values here. He lies and says that the prisoner, when he finds the prisoner's daughter, he basically lies and says, like, yeah, these people are innocent. Just bring them to Vulcan and, basically let them go. And the only reason this guy's a criminal is because of political reasons on his planet, and all his wives were killed. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a nice episode. It's a nice Odo episode. There's a lot of like, I distinctly remember that like one of my biggest issues with this episode was given the emotional connection that Odo is sort of shown to have. Like Odo talks to Ben like Cisco about this, and Cisco should kind of be aware. Ooh, Odo might be a little morally compromised here, and we don't want to start a political issue with this other planet. It's kind of out of form for Cisco to just let Odo go alone. And in all fairness, if you're doing a prisoner transfer, why only send one person? I feel like the standard would be to send two. But that doesn't allow the plot to go the way it wants. So there were some plot issues with this episode, but generally we went with the B.
Yeah, B sounds good.
I think I put this above. I'm gonna put it below Captive Pursuit, but maybe above Past Prologue. I don't know. I think I like it more than Captive Pursuit, but Captive Pursuit I think is a little bit more tightly written. Nothing special. This episode also got a 7 out of 10 on IMDb. So, I mean, I guess we're in line with that. But now we're at battle lines.
Battle line.
So
Talk to your pope about your war trauma. Go.
this episode was a C, almost bordering D for me at least.
No, I I put it at B. Well, one
Yeah,
C or
we
D.
did
You
disagree.
cannot skip this.
We did. I'm
You
not saying we
cannot
skipped.
skip
I'm
this.
not saying this is a skippable episode. I've never. I put skippable as a different category, right? For me,
Hmm.
skippable was like this doesn't have any greater implications on the plot or world or setting or characters, but it's not really a good episode that you should just watch because it's good, right? Like an A is never really skippable because it's good, but a D episode can be pivotal. An F episode can be pivotal to the series, right?
Hmm.
So, like here, the reason I have battle lines so low is because it creates a problem in the death of Kaiopaka that really should carry
Yeah.
over more throughout the series. She dies here
Yeah.
and she comes back to life and then she just can't leave the planet. And it's just like, oh, so effectively to the rest of the galaxy, she's dead. And
Hmm.
really, Cisco should have been in hot water for this. In fact, one of our things we talked about when we were talking about the hands of the prophets is a lot of this episode could strengthen some of the characterization of Kai Wynn if she brought up the fact that Cisco is partially responsible for the vanishing or the leaving of Kai Opaka.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, even more so, right? Like, there's a lot. This episode is filled with technobabble where it's like nothing really makes sense. Hell, at one point, O'Brien says like, "I'm gonna need to like reverse and create a phase oscillator." And Dax asks, "What's a reverse phase oscillator?" And O'Brien says, "I don't. I'll know you. I'll tell you when I figure out what it is myself." Like, it's sort of like peak technobabble where it's like this is bullshit that we just need to propagate the plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Couple that with the weird planet that Battle Lines takes place on, and it's like you just need a technology to tell you this weird story you wanted to tell, and you didn't really care if it wasn't satisfying or if it didn't make sense in terms of narrative structure. When can they get off the
Mm-hmm.
planet? When we want them to. You could have just said that, and you write out the O'Brien Dax things like replace all their scenes with a guy sitting in the chair saying it's not time for Cisco and his crew to be rescued yet, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
equivalent of what those scenes are. Um,
Yeah.
we get some
Yep.
good stuff with Kira, which I think is the thing that really redeems this episode the most and why I give it a C. You know, I gave this episode a C because I think it does a lot of stuff for Kira.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of it.
Yeah.
Oh, and one other thing I
Yeah.
did compliment this episode for, and I did want to bring it up. It is the first time that on screen that Kira meets Kai Wynn or Kai Opaka. However,
Yeah.
their interactions are so like their characters are fairly well characterized, and the understanding of Bjorn Faith is so well characterized, and just honestly, the talent of the actresses, they managed to make it
Mm-hmm.
feel like these characters have had multiple on-screen interactions, and we understand their relationship. Right? Every time I
Yeah.
watched this episode before, like this, my brain had just kind of input the fact that oh yeah, they've interacted with each other before, like probably an emissary or something, right? It's like no, not at all. This is their
Yep.
first interaction, and as such, like, but it does a very good job because odds are these characters like were probably written to have backstories where they interacted with each other, and in this
Mm-hmm.
context, you have to convey that, and I think they do that well. So there's things that save this episode, but there's just a lot of problems that cannot be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I want to see if I
Poor grandma having to die on this planet for the sins
oh,
of
there
Starfleet.
was um there was one thing I did right that was kind of a joke, which is the start of the episode does have that scene where they find the Cardassian reports on like the Bajoran militants.
Oh, and cares about to shit herself and
Oh yeah,
Ray.
she gets
A
mad that she's
minor
like,
nuisance.
I'm a minor operative of non-importance. And I remember like we speculated, it's like I wonder if like Gul Dukat just edited
Uh,
her form to
yeah.
fuck with her.
Oh yeah, like given what we know of Ducat later on and how he views Kira, and like the relationship we also know he has to her family later on, it's like he heard she was coming to the station. It's like, ooh, ooh. Even if I won't see it, that would be fucking hilarious. Like straight up, Ducat would do that to manipulate and fuck with her. That is a pro Cardassian move.
Yep. And
Yeah.
so Do you want to guess what Battle Lines was given?
5.
6.6. Fairly low.
Okay.
All right. Well, now
Okay.
we're at Storyteller, everyone's favorite episode.
Um. Nog Jake wanna get with the Bajoran girl, and also O'Brien must suffer. That's what this
Yeah,
episode is.
like this episode is we gave this episode a D. It's a pretty bad one. Um
Yeah.
the A plot, which is Bashir and O'Brien going down to this planet to like deal with some problems they've been having. Turns out the leader of this place basically constructed like some creature using technology that's based on their fears, and they have to scare it off once a year for like multiple nights. And if they fail to do that, their village will be destroyed. And then like there's all this complicated things with the guy who's supposed to be chosen failed. So then the old storyteller chose O'Brien because he felt that in doing so, it would inspire his initial choice to do better. It's such bullshit. The guy literally endangers the town to make them more, I don't know, emotionally stable, to help them remove their
Yeah.
fears and give them confidence in everyday life. I'm like, dude, but like the way it's shown is these people are actually in danger.
Yeah, well,
You
it's
know?
not. It's specifically like they were going to tear themselves apart a couple generations back, and they're like,
Yeah.
we need a unifying fear to fight against to
Well, it's
not
like
kill each other.
obviously there's a million moral implications of that, right? Like, oh, you're manipulating this entire village of people. Second, uh, you're putting them in actual danger when in reality you could have tried to just fake the danger. Where if ever you failed,
Mm.
it wouldn't actually kill anybody. Like it would, but the way it's presented
Nah,
is
they gotta
no,
die.
they can't know that I lied to them, so they have to die if it fails. Um,
Hmm.
but even more so, it's like this plot is very like nonsensical. I mean, I guess it's the first time we get O'Brien and Bashir interacting extensively. So we get the
Hmm.
start of that building friendship, which I think was maybe something that saved this episode a little bit, but not really.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think. And then we have the other plot, which is there is this treaty disagreement from two tribes of Bajorans over land, and the river Moot was diverted because of the Cardassians, and as such, they're saying like, look, one side is saying that the river was the delineation point. Because it moved, we get all that land. And the other side says, no, we use where the original land was, or the original river
Hmm.
was, as the delineation point. So there's this disagreement between these two tribes. One of them is led by a daughter who I guess has been thrusted into this position because of her parents
Yeah.
dying or the previous person putting her in charge.
Yeah.
And like she has interactions with like Nog and Jake, which I think are probably the best parts of this episode. Like it's
Hmm.
fun seeing this character who's trying to be an adult be allowed to act like a kid and be like, oh, I get this is probably very meaningful for her, but like also Nog and Jake kind of teach her a little bit about how she should be behaving and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Benjamin gives like some advice to her saying, you have to do what's best for people. But then they just wrap up that plot line super quickly and say, yeah, it all worked out. I'm like, oh, it seemed like you guys were really kind of debating this, and now you're just like, yeah, it's fine.
Hmm.
Like I feel like that could have been an interesting plot line if you just had like more time for it, but instead we had to do the storyteller plot line as well. Um, this is a D.
Hmm.
I think it
Yeah.
is. I think it is not as bad as Move Along Home.
Oh yeah, it's not as bad as that.
There's some
Do we
good
think
stuff
it's?
in here. There's some good concepts and some stuff in here. I don't know if it's better than Culus. I might just kind of put them on the same level.
Hmm.
Again, it's like one of the things like it feels like the plot lines just wrap up super quickly in the end, so we don't really get to feel like anything mattered.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so Storyteller is given a 6.0. Oh, the second lowest rated episode of the season.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then
That's
we're at
good.
Progress.
Oh, progress. A Kira episode. Another Kira episode.
Yep. Uh,
What's the
so
B plot here? I know the main
what?
plot is uh oh right, this is okay, so there's the Kira plot line, but there's also the Jake Nog plot line of basically barter your way upwards, and it's actually a good like plot line because
Oh yeah,
later
our
on,
biggest criticism of this episode is the B plot is so much better than the A plot.
I wouldn't go that far, but the A plot is like its influence. It's just like okay, yeah, Kira. This is another step towards Kira accepting what's happening, but the B plot with Jake and Nog. Nog learns a very important lesson that should serve Ferengi well, in part because of Jake being like, just believe it, trust in like these trades that will lead us to something, right? Um, and it's something that then comes up way later on of Nog teaching that lesson to basically O'Brien when O'Brien needs some supplies to repair the station, and Nog going on a fucking wild barter chain to get what he needs, while O'Brien's just like trying to not get killed by anyone who's had their stuff bartered away temporarily.
Well,
But
and
it's like, yeah, like,
I want to bring up something that's a major spoiler for the overall setting, although it doesn't ever happen in DS9. It does spoil something in DS9, which is so Nog eventually becomes a Starfleet operative or a Starfleet officer.
yeah.
Um, really great plot line for him, but this episode is where he gets the main lesson that helps him be one of the like few people to ever beat the Kobayashi Maru.
Yep.
He creates
Ye-
a trade. He creates a negotiation and trade deal so complicated for the Kobayashi Maru system it shuts down.
Yep.
Um, so he basically just overloads it with Ferengi dealings. But you know the biggest issue we had with this episode, at least I had with it, is
hmm
the I'm trying to remember his name. I want to see if I can get his name. Da, 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 what is the name of the like the Bajoran that Kira is working with?
Oh fuck! What is his name? Hang on, I've got the wiki pulled up.
Mullabach. Mullabach.
Yeah,
So
Mollabach. Yep.
he is he is increasingly like stubborn to an
hmm
unrealistic point. I can see someone being this stubborn about some things, but this guy is very quickly becoming like so the best analogy would be like if the government was trying to buy up a series of like a set of land to drill for oil and you had a house on that and
hmm
you refused to sell. And it's like, okay,
hmm
so what would happen is the government would, worst case scenario, and this would probably not really happen today, but it probably would have happened like, 60, 70 years ago, definitely. The government would basically
hmm
be like, we're taking you off your land, knocking your house down, giving you a check, and saying goodbye. That's not the case here. They want to crack into the moon that he's living on in order to siphon the gas within it for power. And
hmm
he basically is like, no, I'm going to stay here. It's like, okay, so they're going to do that anyway, and it's going to vaporize you. Like, this isn't a matter of they're going to take you off the planet by force. They will literally vaporize you.
Yeah.
Um, there's nothing he can do. He thinks that there is, and Kira gets a lot of character development here, so that's what saves this episode, her plot line for it. But generally, he is a huge problem. I feel like his character is a little bit like, I guess I can believe someone like that exists, but it makes it very frustrating to watch. And honestly, I'm really kind of pushing it when I say he's somewhat believable. I feel like he's a little bit too crazy. But
hmm
all in all, the B plot is really good. The A plot has a lot of good stuff for Kira, and like you said, it really ties into her greater arc for the season. We gave this an episode in A, but it's probably the lowest rated A we have.
Yeah.
Not the lowest rated
Yeah.
A we have, but lowest rated A we have right now, I think. So yeah. Um,
Yep.
and now we are at if wishes were how horses. Hey, so
Yeah.
this episode, this one's not great. Um, there's a lot of problems with
No.
this episode. You have an alien species that the way they're written doesn't make sense. I don't know how you can have a species that can communicate with humans and have conversations with humans that lacks imagination. I just don't know how you
Yeah.
could
It's
do that because, like, to have a conversation with someone requires a level of abstract thought. Like, you have to like think of what you're going to say next and think of what they're going to say in response. And
mhm.
would that not like thinking abstractly would require imagination? Like, you'd have to
Yeah.
imagine what they're saying. Like, if I ask you a question, Pike, that's because I imagine like you're going to answer it. I have some understanding of a non-existent future where you've responded to a question of mine. Now, that might be
Mhm.
conflating imagination, how they use it with, other mental faculties here. But they're
Mhm.
like, oh, we've never seen anything like your imagination. It's so crazy. And like, it's so wonderful. I'm like, guys, I don't know if I believe that. You're too normal. Like, if there was a Star Trek alien, and there's been a few of them that are so fundamentally different, and you said they had no
Mhm.
imagination, I would believe it, right? Like we've seen like non-carbon life forms, synthetic life forms. We've seen a bunch of stuff in Star Trek, right?
Mhm.
If you said some of those things didn't have imagination, I'd believe you. But when you say this humanoid alien species that seems to have the ability to warp reality or to change people's perception of reality, to say, oh, they also lack imagination, I'm sitting there like, I don't know, my man. I don't think that's how that works.
I don't know, man. I don't
Um,
know. Big
they act
thinky.
irrational. The episode has some good character work, and that's kind of it. We ended up giving this
Mhm.
episode a C.
Yeah, it's a
I mean, I
C.
think
It's
there's
a
some
C.
stuff in there, but there's just really nothing good. It's like it's ended up being one of the ones where it's like, why is it bad? Well, it's bad because it doesn't really do anything good. Like, there wasn't any, and there's maybe one or two bad things in it, but it just doesn't do anything well. So
Yeah.
I'm putting it below Passengers, but above Babel. Overall, I think it's like this is one of those like this is like the quintessential skip episode of the season, excluding the
Mhm.
bad ones. Honestly, you should skip Dax. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Dax, you literally Dax like will just haunt you for the rest of your fucking life. Just skip it and don't have it as baggage for the rest of like
True.
things with Trills.
Also,
Yep.
we didn't mention it before. Progress got a 6.8, which is criminally
Mm.
low. And if Wishes Were Horses got a 6.4, which
Mhm.
is probably fair based on their scaling. However, we are now at
Yeah.
The Forsaken. A. Fight me.
Hey.
Um,
What did you do? Did you put it
I
at
just said,
A?
yeah, I said A.
Oh, I thought you said fight me.
Yeah, I said fight me. I
Uh.
put it at A.
Oh, I thought you said hey, fight me, not a fight me. I thought you said
That's
hey,
fair.
like
That's
hello
fair.
or yeah.
Okay, that's fair. But yeah, we've talked about this extensively. The interaction between Odo and Lexana Troy, phenomenally good. Um,
Mhm.
Great episode. We talked about it at length. I don't think I could say anything more other than it's probably my favorite
Mhm.
interaction in the season. Again,
Mhm.
duet, best episode. But to me, Forsaken will have that place in my heart as like I really like. I didn't like Lysana Troy, and in a single episode, you deconstructed her and built her back up, and in the same vein, did the same thing to Odo in a phenomenal way. So both of these
Hmm.
are now good characters. This is probably like this is the last major Odo episode, and it's a pretty high note to end off on him. So
Hmm.
it's an A. And now Dramatis Personae. I'm not hearing anything else. It's a D.
It's a D, baby.
And the thing that makes me mad is Forsaken is a 6.9 out of 10, and Dramatis Personae is a 7.
Alright. Holowix, don't they did Hadrian and Nero and all of them did not go far enough, and they targeted the
Okay.
wrong group.
All right. Well, we have Dramatis Personae, pretty bad episode. We've said plenty of things about it. There's no character work, and there's a lot of plot issues. How it ends is very stupid. They expose everyone to an open hangar bay, and they're all fine. They never explain how
Mhm.
the telepathic matrix works, so I have a very vague understanding of the stakes of the episode. I don't understand. I don't understand the base. Like Babel did it better. Babel explained how the virus moved throughout the station. This doesn't explain
Mhm.
anything about the virus. It just says all the main characters are infected and they're acting out of character. It's
Mhm.
fun, I suppose, if you want to be like, yeah, these characters are acting as a caricature of themselves. But if all I can say is it's fun, like that's not a lot of
Mhm.
points. And then of course there's all the stupid stuff on top of it. So it's like, it's fun in the same way running through a construction site as a child is fun. This is probably very dangerous. It's probably not a good thing you're doing this. You're going to get hurt.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, we gave that a D. And of course, then we had Duet. Nothing else needs to be said. It's phenomenal. Um 9.0 out of 10. And last, the episode we just reviewed, In the Hands of the Prophets. So, how do we want to put this? Like, it's probably
Mm-hmm.
it's probably an A. We get a lot of really good Cisco stuff. We get good exposure to Kai Wynn. We get some good Kira stuff. I mean, we sang its praises. It is it is an episode that deals with a controversial topic that's even controversial today, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't pick a side. And in fact, one thing I did compliment the episode about is that instead of showing how both sides have merits, it instead says both sides have flaws. So it focuses on the differences in a unique way and showing how both sides end up really kind of just breaking down in their conversations about what they believe in or they have ulterior motives. You know, obviously Kai
Mm-hmm.
Wynn is more of the antagonist. She has an ulterior motive that is very malicious, but uh, you know, Keiko is just as not just as, but she is also somewhat problematic here. Like, you know, once her lessons get canceled, the students who remain, she starts teaching them specifically about Galileo, not because it's in their lesson plan, but really just to say, this is why I'm right. Because this is, look at this other
Mm-hmm.
person in history who represents my position right now. They were persecuted wrongly. I'm being persecuted wrongly. It's like, I understand what you're saying, Keiko, but are you not doing exactly what you didn't want to do for the Bajorans, which is you're teaching in a way that proposes ideas in people's heads rather than educates them?
Mm-hmm.
Look, there's a lot of things he said about the
Yeah.
episode. I think, but I ended up giving this episode today. I think it does a lot of things very well. A lot of good character
Yeah.
stuff, good plot work. There might have been one or two. I think our biggest issue with the episode is the nature of like building a homemade bomb and getting it to the school. When the episode also deals with like phasers being something that they can trace. I guess like we just had to conclude. I guess they just can't trace this homemade bomb, which is not a plot hole or it's not anything like that. It's just like I guess they can't do that. I suppose that's how it works. It's a little weird when you have the episode
See.
focusing on tracking weapons that people hold that someone else was able to just
Mm.
move a bomb because ultimately, right? They went through all this effort to like they went through all this effort and
So,
lost because of it to get a phaser on the promenade so they can shoot Vedic Barile, right?
yeah. So
When they could have just brought
it's
a homemade bomb.
so they specific. Kai only wanted to kill Belial. Only wanted to kill Belial. Keiko would
Yes.
have been acceptable losses if she was in the school. Um, um, and it's like, yeah, like a phaser or any sort of firearm, which you would not want to use a firearm on the station because one hole. I mean, even phasers are already big. Like, how does this not like? I need to look into technology of what they justify to not poke a hole through shit. But it's like a homemade gun, like, is a pain in the ass to make, while a
No,
bomb is
I'm not saying a
like.
homemade gun, right? I'm saying like, okay,
Hmm.
the whole goal is Kai Wynn is trying to kill or sorry, Vedic Wynn is trying to kill Vedic Barile. That is her ultimate goal.
Hmm.
In this, she starts a controversy to get him out of the monastery, which is her goal. She starts a controversy on DS9
Uh-huh.
to get him there. And the only reason they fail is because O'Brien discovers the plot to disable the phaser detectors on the promenade. Right?
Hmm.
If he hadn't found out in time and he hadn't warned Cisco, Neela would have killed Barile. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my thought is, okay, is there not an easier way you could have done this plan? Like, get Vedic Barile to the station, get him to go in a place where there's a homemade bomb. There's gonna be casualties, but he dies, a ton of Bajorans die. Meanwhile, Kai Wynn's right there saying, see, look at us. We're still standing. I'm here, and this is because of the godless heathens of the Federation. Like, I think there is and you know, she's probably not at that point yet, right? She's not at that point of killing everybody, which is probably the
Yeah.
best
Because
justification. But her plan is
there's
still a little
also
bit
the fact of
batshit
like,
crazy.
when it's like, see, we're still here, and it's because like, it's like I would be looking at, like, so you're putting the blame for this guy who is like the death of this Bajorian leader who is probably gonna be friendly to the Federation, and like, a bunch of innocent Bajorans. You're putting the blame on the Federation that he would have been friendly to, while saying that your opposition to the Federation and thus being chosen by the prophets is why you live. It's like I'm just sitting here like, oh, this is a
Again,
fucking terrible psyop. This is
well,
a
no,
like this is.
I 100% agree. I guess my point is there is a million ways you could have done this easier. Like
Mm-hmm.
they went through a very complicated plan, and unfortunately, because it was so overly complicated, it failed. If it wasn't, now again, Kai Wynn might not be at that point. There's a lot of good character work that suggests she's not at the point yet where she's willing to kill a lot of Bajorans. She was willing to kill Kai. I don't think she was willing to kill Keiko, right? Like she blew up the
Mm-hmm.
school, but I think that there might have been a circumstance where they knew the school was empty, right? No one got hurt
Mm-hmm.
in the explosion, so they probably did it intentionally when the school was empty. But either way, this episode is an A for me. I think it's an A for you too.
Yeah, it's an A. It's an A.
Yeah, and I think it might. I don't think it's better than Emissary, but it's right below it in my mind.
Huh.
All
I can
right,
follow
so
that. Yeah.
and In the Hands of the Prophets has a 7.7. Not a bad rating for them, but generally all these ratings are a little bit too skewed. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
let's see. I just want to double check something. Yeah. All right. So yeah. All in all, that is season 1 of DS9 having been reviewed. Our final
Mm-hmm.
tally is 1 S tier, 5 A tiers,
Mm-hmm.
4 B tiers, 4 C tiers, 4 D tiers, and an F tier. I
Yeah.
think we're more or less 100% in agreement on some of these, although, we probably differ a little bit on some of them. We just discussed it enough that we kind of iron out our opinions. Um,
Yeah, I'm totally not
yeah,
applauding
I
your
mean,
death for what you've done.
all in all, obviously it is a mixed bag of a season, right? There
Yeah.
are, if we consider C and below, like if we consider D and below bad, there's 5 bad episodes in this season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Out of
if
like
we can
20 episodes.
out of 20, well, that's still a fourth, right? That's 20. That's four. Like that is 1/4 of the episodes that are not good. There's
Mm-hmm.
a few episodes that are middling. There's 4 middling episodes, so there we go. There's 20% that are not really worth watching, even if
Mm-hmm.
there's some stuff in them that's good, and then the rest are good. DS9 is a phenomenal series, and season 1 has its hiccups. There's always going to be bad shows, but I mean, we debated like what is the best. I mean, obviously it's Duet, but there's so many episodes that are like that compete with it. I think there's just a lot of good
Mm-hmm.
episodes in the season, a lot of great stuff, and overall, I mean, we're ready to head into season 2, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be better than season 1. That's my
Mm-hmm.
gamble here. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if we have anything else to say. Anything you want to
Nothing
say, Pike?
else.
All right, everybody. You will see us next time as we review episode 1 of season 2 of DS9, The Homecoming. Have a good
Are
night,
we actually
everybody.
gonna do like? Are we gonna actually do that as like 3 separate episodes? Because that is a 3-parter. Like I'm
Oh
fine with
my
that. I
God,
just
you're
want to know.
right. All right, we'll figure that out then. All right, see you, everybody.
See ya.